Still Austin Whiskey Company is a true grain-to-glass distillery situated in the heart of South Austin. The Still Austin team is committed to producing the highest quality whiskey with a process they've perfected using local resources and sustainable practices. Never sourced, always handmade, in-house. Their double gold winning flagship straight bourbon, cask strength bourbon, and still rye gin are available throughout Texas and can also be shipped to most U.S. states. To find out more, visit www.stillaustin.com. There's a new award-winning 4-grain straight bourbon whiskey that's been taking the market by storm, Penelope Bourbon. Penelope's balanced yet flavorful taste profile comes from a unique blend of 3 bourbon mash bills. Currently available in 3 expressions, 4-grain, barrel strength, and toasted, Penelope is remarkably smooth and flavorful. So whether you're sipping neat or using it in your favorite cocktail, Penelope is perfect for you. Penelope Bourbon is available throughout Kentucky, as well as select markets and online at penelopebourbon.com.
With Liquor Barn, you can shop your favorite bourbon, that perfect bottle of wine, or discover something new. To place an order for pickup or delivery, download the Liquor Barn app, visit liquorbarn.com, or call your nearest Liquor Barn location. Follow us on social media and subscribe to our email list for all the latest news on products, promotions, and events. Liquor Barn, where Kentuckians go to celebrate life. Cheers!
Proudly made in the USA and inspired by the American lifestyle, Country Smooth Bourbon was developed by the first female founder and CEO of an American bourbon whiskey company as a refined experience to be savored on its own or enjoyed in cocktails. We are dedicated to celebrating the spirit of America and the crafting of premium bourbon whiskey. To learn more, visit countrysmooth.com, where you can order online or find a retailer near you. Cheers. Country Smooth. Female founded, country grounded.
Welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast, your source for all things bourbon. Join your hosts, Mark and Matt, as they drink and review bourbons, share news about upcoming events, interview the who's who in the bourbon world, and, most importantly, bring you along for the fun of living the bourbon life. Now, here's your hosts, Mark and Matt.
All right, everybody, welcome back for another episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, as always, is my good friend live in the Bourbon Life studios tonight with me, Matt. Matt, how's it going, man?
Hey, Mark, I'm doing great, man. And boy, is it ever good to be back in the Bourbon Life studios.
It is, man. It really is, Matt. I'm thrilled to be here. Last week had a little bit of a hiatus, but man, just happy to be back and feeling good and ready to do a great show tonight for sure. So
yeah, hey, a little hiatus is better than a little hiatal, right?
Yeah, definitely. But this is, of course, the Bourbon Life Podcast presented by Still Austin Whiskey Company. We appreciate their support, and we appreciate the support of all of our sponsors. And Matt, with that said, man, I really don't have much to add to that. I'm ready to kind of jump into the show. So you want to tell everybody who we have with us?
Absolutely, I do. We have joining us tonight or whenever it is. What? Oh, come on. Whenever it is you're listening to it, from the podcast Dads Drinking Bourbon, John Edwards. John, welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast.
Thank you. And I have a few things to add. Are
Jump
you all
in there.
Literally in the same place, like in different rooms in the house?
Yeah, we're at my house in the basement. So Matt's out in the main living area in the basement, and I'm in my office here in the basement.
Why don't you just like sit at the same table? I know Mark went on Facebook and did a whole thing to get a new table. Do you not like Matt? Can you not look at him while
I'm not allowed at the table.
So we have Mark over at the adults table, and then Matt is at the kids table outside.
Absolutely. Yeah. I am like that forbidden uncle at the wedding that gets banished to the kids table or the dog underneath the table just eating Mark's scraps, proverbially.
Yeah, whatever, man. And this is, so the weird thing is, John, recording with Squadcast like we do when we do remote shows like this, Matt has to be on a laptop and I have to be on a separate computer. So I have a desktop that's in my office, and then I have a separate laptop that Matt uses. So I set him up outside or not outside, but set him up in another location.
In the shed.
Whatever, dude.
He runs an extension cord.
Look at the shed he's in there with the bourbon bottles behind him, man. He's in a nice location there, but it just, the way Squadcast is set up, we got to be on separate computers. So we can't, sitting at the same table would be kind of hard. Now, when we record with like the Bourbon Life crew, or if we have live guests that come over and record with us, yeah, man, I've got that table. I'm ready to go with that, John. I'm excited that, you paid attention to that. And I'm excited to get to use it. We have not used it yet.
I'm going to have to talk to you about your setup, because there's a board you can get, and both of you could be sitting at the same table and you could also be getting the audio. But anyways, I digress. We'll take it offline. I gotcha. We'll have one of our famous conversations where I keep you on the phone way too long, and I'll talk to you all about it.
That's what I was going to say. John, I always like to tell our listeners when I know my guest, and you and I have known each other for quite some time now. We actually have never met in person, though, which is really weird, because I keep coming to Nashville and I keep texting him and saying, "Hey, John, I'm going to be down in town." And you're like, "Oh, that's awesome. Let me know." And then it's like crickets. I'm like, "Okay, John, I was here. Sorry I missed you, man." And you're like, "Oh, something came up, dude." I'm like, "Okay, sure." And then I see pictures of you with like 6 other bourbon influencers and podcasters out on the town, up on top of like huge buildings in downtown Nashville. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I get it now.
No, that happens. I will tell you, because you are a big time bourbon influencer. Let me tell you.
Whatever, dude.
I love the Bourbon Life, and I have been a listener for a very long time. What people don't realize, and there's a big joke within the Nashville community that like, you invite John, but I'm not coming. And I'm big on family. So obviously with the name Dads Drinking Bourbon. So when the weekend comes, or if it's a weeknight and bedtime is going on, like, I don't dip. So I tell everybody I'm really good after 8:30. So if you can hang after 8:30, I'm good when I put my daughter to bed. But besides that, and if it's the weekend, I'm pretty much family. So I tell Mark all the time, I'm like, I need like a month lead up because I have to ask for permission to get out of family time. And Mark comes down, he's like, "Hey, I'm in Nashville." And I'm like, "That's great. It doesn't help me."
Sorry, man. I'll work on that. I promise, John. Next time I plan, I'll let you know well ahead of time, and we'll definitely get together and go out and do something. Hit Bricktops, which is one of my favorite little restaurants there on West End. So
yeah, come to the one in Franklin. It makes it a whole lot easier for me.
There you go. Yeah, that's true. So, all right, let's jump in. Let's talk real quick about what we're going to drink for this first round. Matt, you want to tell everybody, you got the bottle out there. Do you want to tell everybody what we got poured up this first round?
Sure thing. Round number 1 is a throwback. Well, not a throwback, but a re-release of something that we've all been, at least I know I've been really anxious to see on the shelves again, coming up pretty soon here. But this is the Michter's Toasted Barrel Bourbon. It is back out for 2021. I think it had a 2 or 3 year hiatus.
Yeah, I think it was 2018 was the last one.
Mm-hmm. And so we are all excited to have it back on the shelves, coming to hopefully a store near you this autumn.
Yeah, I think retail on this is actually $100 as well. And I'm a big homer man. Michter's stuff is just, they just kill it. But anyway, talking about the Toasted Barrel Bourbon here. This is, I guess it's an undisclosed mash bill as far as I know. I couldn't find any information on it. The communications they sent out about it has nothing on that, has no age statement. So I have no information on that. So Matt, what do you pick up on this, man?
Oh, there's a huge nose of brown sugar, a lot of toasty marshmallow in there, a lot of campfire. I also get, like some red fruit, maybe some plum or some fig, or just some sort of a luscious, nice red fruit to go with it. But it's just got this really, really great toasty aroma. The oak comes through. There's wood. There's campfire in it. Just a really, really great nose to it.
Yeah, John, what about you, man? What do you get on it?
So on the nose, and by the way, the only thing that I was able to ever find on Michter's was 79, 11, and 10. So I don't know if that's the same mash bill, if that's what it is now, but previously their other releases were 79, 11, and 10. Nose on this, I just get a whole lot of root beer. Like there's
Okay.
just a whole bunch of root beer that comes in, and it's like that fizziness of it
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
it's almost like carbonation hitting up your nose. Like when you get that root beer and you pour it and it's still kind of fizzing and the foam
Yeah.
hasn't gone down.
Yeah. John, it's crazy, man. Cause you guys know, both of you guys know, and some of our listeners know I'm just a few days post COVID now. So my smeller is not quite up to quite up to par. When I first got this bottle a few weeks ago though, and opened it, I remember it was just like French toast and maple syrup. But I swear, John, now that you said root beer, I went right back in and took a nose of it. And that's exactly what comes across. So the power of suggestion is there, but it is, man. It is root beer. That's hilarious. I'd never thought about that before, but I definitely picked that out from that.
I always love that though, when you're tasting with someone and you have a note and there's always something you're like, there's something there and I can't quite pinpoint what it is.
Yeah.
And then somebody says, "Hey, I got this," and you're like, "Oh, that's it. I got it."
Yeah. See, that's what Matt's always the guy that always picks the things out. I'm just like, oh yeah. Cause I'm like, hey, vanilla and caramel. And now with post COVID, it's like, I don't even get the vanilla and caramel as much, but anyway. So John,
so Matt, you're tasting and Mark's like, "Well, it smells like bourbon."
Yeah, exactly. It's when in doubt. It's got a strong nose of bourbon.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy because when all this was going on and I realized I on Saturday afternoon, I was like, I tasted something. And I was like, I don't taste this. And I was like, oh man, this is not good. So I ran over and grabbed a bottle of bourbon really quick just to see if I'd really lost my sense of taste and smell. And I popped the cork out and gave it a smell. And all I could smell was alcohol. Just the ethanol. There was no flavor, no nothing to it. So that for me was the actual COVID test, was whether or not I could pick out even my standard vanilla and caramel, which I couldn't. So I knew things were bad. So John, let's talk a little bit about you.
I just want to mention, not to interrupt you for a second.
No, interrupt me all you want, man.
But Matt is 100% right. I mean, once you get past that root beer on the nose, for me, there is a whole lot of baking spice, brown sugar. It's almost kind of like having root beer with a nice like cookie, like a snickerdoodle cookie with a root beer.
Yeah.
That's totally what I get on this.
That makes a lot of sense, man. And that sounds delicious. I'm going to have to taste it here in a second. I've just been nosing it. I haven't gone in for the taste on it yet. So John, tell our listeners a little bit or a lot of bit, man. Take as long as you want. You have carte blanche on our show, my friend. Tell our listeners about who you are, your background, and how you got involved in the whole bourbon industry, man.
Well, I don't know how involved I necessarily am in the industry. I mean, all of us with the podcast, it's interesting to say because other people have said that before. But anyways, I digress. So my name is John Edwards.
Hey, John.
Hi. I am one half of Dads Drinking Bourbon. So I'm a Kentucky grad. I transferred to Kentucky, played football in college, got hurt, lost my scholarship, and my best friend was born in Louisville and had moved up to Boston, where I'm originally from. And Rick Pitino was coaching the Celtics. My friend had got me into UK since 6th grade, and I went down for a visit. Might have had a lot of Jim Beam, walked up the floor of Rupp Arena, saw the big UK on the floor, and said, "Why am I going to stay at that college? I am transferring here." So that's what I did. And then after college, I got a job with ESPN Radio in town. So covered the Cats, did the horse racing radio network. So did the Derby, Preakness, Belmont, Breeders' Cup, Race of the Day at Keeneland, all over the country, Arlington Million, all sorts of stuff in California and Florida. And but there's no money in radio. So, I left radio, got a job in IT, and then was doing the horse racing radio network on the side for a while, and then eventually had moved up and couldn't do that anymore. But what happened is my daughter was born and she was super colicky, and I would have to rock her to sleep for a long time every night. And I started taking a picture I found the Instagram community. I had an account called Suburban Dad. And then Zeke and I were on a kickball team together. We had both had kids right around the same time. And I was like, we should do something with this. Like let's start a blog or something. So that's where Dads Drinking Bourbon was born. So I was already kind of plugged in, building up Suburban Dad. Then I started building up Dads Drinking Bourbon. I was the only one writing. Unfortunately, Zeke would not write on the blog. So we started this whole blog. I was doing all the work. And so I was like, all right, let's scrap the blog. And that was right when Instagram put out the live. So that was when they introduced the capability for that. So we started doing a show every Sunday night at 9, and we were very centered around blind tasting. It was our one night a week to actually get together. And, you know, when you have kids, you can't really do much. So we always say, you know, throughout the podcast and throughout the lives and everything, you know, it's like, honey, you know where I am? It's recorded. You know, I'm not and then you listen to the recording and it's like, well, this knows I get root beer. And she's like, all right, you're a dork. I'm not, like, you're fine. And so we started doing the lives and built up a following on Instagram. But then people were like, I want to be able to text while I watch you, which you can't do while you're watching the live video.
Right.
So that's how the podcast was born. We realized that people want to be able to multitask. And I know that, you know, there's streamers out there that are getting a lot of downloads and do great work, but you could be watching a computer and texting on your phone at the same time. So it's not necessarily something that is mobile device necessary. Instagram is very much a mobile app. So when you're based on Instagram, people can't really do the other stuff around it. So we transitioned to a podcast in 2017, and then it's been the same thing ever since.
Yeah. No, that's really cool, man. So when you went to school, you transferred down here to UK. Were you in IT? I mean, was that your studies? Was that what you wanted to go into, or what were you actually in?
No, I'm dumb. So I was actually going to be a lawyer like you, and then I smartened up.
Very smart.
I was pre-law. I was political science major with a philosophy minor. Got into law school. Stayed in Lexington, Kentucky. So I was the general manager at WRFL, the campus radio station.
Yeah.
And so what had happened was I stayed in Lexington for a girl, which was because she dumped me 6 months later. I had done a music show. Edit that out. I had done a music show. So I was, you know, in bands too. I was this weird guy because I played guitar and bass and little drums and played around Lexington, played covers in bars. I was that guy in college, but it got you into the bars before you were 21 if you could play the guitar. So
sure,
don't tell anyone that. But I had always done music. And then I just so happened to also be an athlete and a collegiate athlete. And all the guys from the Kentucky Colonel were graduating, and they had the only sports show on WRFL. I mean, WRFL is very much an alternative radio station, but it's also all sorts of stuff. You could have Indian music, you could have noise music, you could have progressive rock. You know, each block of programming was different. And the guys were like, hey, we're graduating. The Big Blue Review isn't going to continue unless somebody continues it. They said, John, would you do it? So I started that show knowing that it was a valuable asset to the campus radio station. I wanted to see it continue. And I was calling into the local ESPN station every day because I wanted to hone my skills. So I was like that dork. I was 21 years old. I had my index card of stats ready to go, talking about the game. And one day I had called up the show and I said, you know, they said, hey, what'd you do? They knew who I was at that point. I was one of those regular callers where it was like, hey, it's John. And they asked what I did over the weekend. I said, well, you know, I just graduated. I'm looking for a job. And they said, we may have something for you. Stay on the line. So went down to the station, was one of the only people who ever showed up to an interview with them in a tie. And they offered me the ops manager position for the ESPN station and Super Talk 96.1. So did that for a while, did the pre and post game for Kentucky football and basketball, was the executive producer for the afternoon sports show, The Sports Huddle. So if you ever heard them talking about John Boy back in the day, that was me.
That's you. Yeah. Nice.
And so that's kind of, I'm rambling. You got me going. So
no, man, that's everybody. I wanted to know about your background and I mean, not to be rude or offensive, John, but you really just don't have the voice for radio, man. So
I got that I'm very nasal. So thank you for that. You're getting at a spot that I'm very self-conscious about, because people tell me I have a radio voice, and I go, I don't really think I do.
Yeah. No, I think you do, John. I know, because we've joked, and the reason I said that, because we talk on the phone every once in a while, and we've talked about that, the fact that people would just like randomly reach out to you and just be like, dude, your voice sucks.
It was just a couple people. We had a couple reviews early on where they said John's voice is too nasal. But
it's like, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah. It's like, I do this for a living. I'm okay with it, So, man, people are, you just never know. Trolls are everywhere out there, John. So you just never know. So let's jump back to to this Michter's and pay it another visit in terms of the taste and the palate. John, I'll start with you if that's cool.
Oh, I was not ready. I was drinking a Miller High Life. So
I thought that's what I saw your picture on Instagram. Was that yesterday? You posted living the high life, the champagne of beers, right?
Yeah, so. This is leftover from the Kentucky Bourbon Festival, and I need to drink it this week because there's no space in the fridge. So let me take a good sip of this.
You do that, Matt. I'll jump back to Matt. Matt's been sipping on it. What do you get, Matt?
I get a big amount of toasted oak, like a toasted oak sugar on the palate. It really comes through with that secondary toasting of the barrel. You get that really, really sweet oak. It's not at all tannic. It's not at all drying. Then there's a little bit of campfire, some smoke coming through with it. Definitely brown sugar, molasses, just a really sweet, toasty, well-rounded nose and nose and palate, I guess, on it as well. Not too long of a finish, but a nice flavor up front that really, I think, is quite pleasant.
Yeah. John, how about you? I noticed you're drinking like 3 other things over there now. So, but you've had a sample, you've gotten back to the Michter. So what do you think?
I had to get something to get the beer out of my mouth, but I agree 100% with Matt. And what I would say as well is the oak really sticks to the roof of my mouth, and where the rest of it kind of goes down, that wood in the oak goes up. It's not a dry oak. Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they're tasting something and it gets really oaky, it either could be tannic, it could be dry, or it could be sweet. And one other thing I'd add to what Matt said was that it is very sweet, but it is not dry. And it doesn't kind of leave you with that feeling where you sit there and you go, it's a very enjoyable pour. Campfire brown sugar, 100%. And it's good. I like it. I always liked it. I think I have a 2014 that is unopened somewhere.
Nice.
That is, I've always been a fan of the Michter's Toasted series, and they always put out good stuff. Don't you think it's funny though? Let's talk whiskey, not to hijack your show, but
that's all right, man.
Michter's really started the whole toasted phenomenon. And
yeah,
now I feel like everybody and their mom toasts.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I agree. We talked about that a couple episodes ago. It was just me and Matt and Chad and Philip, just the Bourbon Life crew. And we were that was kind of the big topic was toasted. It was just, I guess, when Basil Hayden's had just rolled out their toast basil, and it's like, all right, have we gone too far? Is it too far? And we were talking about what our favorites were, and I think everybody pretty much unanimously agreed that the Michter's Toasted Barrel Rye, I think, was probably everybody's favorite toasted. At least mine was. Matt, was that your call too? Or
Yeah, I really like the bourbon. I think their toasted barrel bourbon, and not to take anything away from the toasted barrel rye,
right?
But for me, the toasted barrel bourbon, when I really think of what I want something toasted to taste like, to smell like, to finish like, I think Michter's hits it right on. I believe that there's a good reason that they were kind of one of the first, if not the first, company to break the toasted barrel into the market. And they, I believe, set the standard, set the bar right from the start.
Maybe Woodford Double Oaked. When did Woodford Double Oak come out?
That would be a good question. That might be a toss between those. And of course, I'm sure there were probably people before that just didn't market it that way.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
The first Michter's rye, I was not a fan of the first Michter's toasted rye. And then I was at the bar at Fort Nelson, which is amazing, by the way. They have this chocolate bourbon drink that is incredible. But I was there and I was telling the bartender, I was like, I wasn't really a fan. I love the toasted bourbon, but I wasn't really a fan of the first toasted rye. And he took the second version of it, batch 2, and he said, here, try this.
Yeah.
And I loved it. And I don't know what it was with that first one. It tasted very oaky, like just like I put a block of wood in my mouth.
Yeah.
But the second one I loved, and it was that sweet oak rather than the just wood.
Yeah.
taste.
Yeah. That makes sense.
I like Elijah Craig too. That Elijah Craig toasted was pretty good.
You know what, man? I love Elijah Craig. I will drink Elijah Craig barrel proof all day long, and even just the regular Elijah Craig, especially the picks, because it's incredible. I love it. But I was just, I don't know. There's something about their toasted that I just wasn't a big fan of, man, which surprised me. Really, really shocked, actually. I mean, I thought for sure I was going to love it. And remember, Matt, I think we did a show. Yeah. We had that in the show where
I think we all said it. They just didn't underwhelming. It didn't go far enough.
Yeah, but everybody's palate's different, John. So,
like Field of Dreams, it had to go the distance.
Oh yeah, that's it, man. Hey, I tell you what, we're at the end of round 1 here. So why don't we take a quick break? Final thoughts though on the Michter's toasted barrel bourbon, guys. What do you think?
If I can find a bottle, absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't want to pay what secondary is going to be for this one. I don't know how you guys are on mentioning this on the show.
Talk about it. Go ahead, man. I'm fine with it.
I would pay retail for this. And I think this is going to end up being one of those ones that ends up being ridiculous on secondary. And, most I'd probably spend on this even in a retail store because, a bunch of them are going to mark it up. 150 to 200 I'd be in. I mean, that's still a stretch, but because I like the Michter's toasted the best. But over that, I'm out.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the retail, their sheet said it was at like $100 on retail on this. So, if you can find it, definitely for me, it's a win. It's a pick. I would definitely get it if you can. But yeah, I agree, John. I wouldn't pay, north of 150. I would not pay $200 for it. I love their stuff, but I'm just not gonna do that. So that's me.
What's the proof on it?
91.4. Is that right, Matt?
That is correct.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest problem. I know you're trying to get to round 2, but I think that's the biggest problem with this is it's a great pour, but it lacks the thickness. And in tasting it again, it's a very rich pour full of flavor, but at the proof it's at, it doesn't have the viscosity that really leaves the coating in your mouth.
Right.
That mouthfeel that I always kind of look for when you're looking at a premium one. So I would kind of change. 150 is probably my topper on this, just because once I'm getting higher, I want something that's going to have a longer finish and really make me know that it's worth it. Like that's my value is it a good pour? Does it sustain or does it go away quickly?
Yep. That makes sense to me. All right, guys, let's take a quick break. We'll be back with more with John Edwards from Dads Drinking Bourbon in just a minute. So everybody sit tight And we'll be right back.
Three Chord's line of whiskeys embody the spirit of creativity. The whiskey is a true collaboration between producer and composer Neil Giraldo and master blender distiller Ari Sussman. The Three Chord team of expert blenders, coopers, and sensory professionals have developed a multi-step process they call Perfectly Tuned Taste. This process begins by carefully selecting the finest bourbon and rye whiskeys from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, and then blending them together. Find out more about the whiskeys and distribution in your area at www.threechordbourbon.com.
Located just east of Lake Tahoe and the Sierra Nevada mountains, Frey Ranch Distillery was founded by fifth-generation Nevada farmers. Our grain-to-glass bourbon is made using a 4-grain mash bill, including a non-GMO corn, rye, wheat, and barley, all of which is 100% sustainably grown on the 1,500-acre Frey Ranch. And our commitment to excellence shows with a recent gold medal win at the 2020 Whiskeys of the World and USA Spirits competitions. Find out more at www.freyranch.com. All right, everybody, welcome back for round 2 of the Bourbon Life Podcast presented by Still Austin Whiskey Company. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, as always, is my good friend, Matt. Still here in the live in the Bourbon Life Studios, otherwise known as my basement. Matt,
That's right.
how you doing out there in your cushy setup, man?
Yeah, so now you got to add that in there because everybody thinks you keep me in a doghouse.
How's that closet working out over there for
Yeah.
you?
You know what I love is the number one thing people say is like recording a podcast. It's just two dudes in their mom's basement, like talking about whiskey. And it's literally two dudes in Mark's basement talking about whiskey.
That's it, man. You know, that's what we do. I mean, the first one was recorded in my kitchen at our granite countertop with all of our stainless steel appliances, and Matt was wearing this big puffy swooshy jacket. So every time Matt moved his arms or any part of his body, all you could hear on the mic was whoosh, 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 whoosh. So there was no way I could edit that out, man. The first I just loathe going back to listen to that first podcast, but every once in a while I'll just fire it up and start listening to it, and it's like, oh man.
Oh, you're braver than I am. Anytime somebody asks,
Awesome.
I get on the subject of the podcast and someone says, "Oh, you have a podcast. What's it called?" And I always say, "Oh, well, it's called The Bourbon Life. You should check us out, but skip episodes 1 through 7."
Just take them down now at this point. You have enough episodes.
Well, that's true. I guess I could. I just never thought
Yes.
about that.
Please.
They're just still out there in perpetuity, right? So maybe somebody could use a good laugh and go and check that out. But Matt, tell everybody who we have with us so they know this stranger that's just jumping in randomly and talking on the show.
Sure deal. We've got from the Dads Drinking Bourbon podcast, John Edwards. He is back here for round or session number 2, and we have poured up. Let's get right into it.
I love how this has turned into the zoo crew. And like, you get sound effects now. And I will say, jumping in before you set up the second thing we're drinking, the first podcast we did, I changed everything around because we would taste together and then I would kind of cut it down. But the problem is when we were tasting together and we were recording it, it was about an hour of, well, this is what I get, so it was that sniffing on the nose.
Yeah.
And so then we decided that we were going to start tasting separately beforehand, not sharing our notes with each other and then saving that for the show. So we all learn. I will just tell you, Mark, we all learn. We all make mistakes. And I didn't want an hour of sniffing just like you didn't want puffy jackets.
Well, good for you for figuring that out, because Mark has this really great habit of getting a well-respected name like Harlan Wheatley or someone on the show and getting to the first thing and immediately throwing it over to me about telling this master distiller what his bourbon smells and tastes like before I've even really had a chance.
It's called delegation of power, man. It's like, come on, Matt, just do it. You're better. You're so much better at this than I am. So just, tell Harlan what you're tasting in his bourbon. So
yeah. And the first few times I was really nervous, but
I always wait till the end. So if I have a guest on, I will interview them and then we'll kind of wait and get like 45 minutes in or a half an hour in.
Yeah.
and then we'll talk about their whiskey. Number one, like maybe they like us a little bit more or they hate us. So whatever we say at that point, like they've already decided on us before we tell them what their whiskey's like.
Yeah. So it's like, we're all drinking here and we're a little tipsy now. So even if you hate us, we're still going to talk about your bourbon. Okay. So, but you guys, now, John, I mean, it's a good point. It's funny you say that before we talk about what we're drinking, because I mean, you and Zeke, and we didn't really talk much about Zeke. He's your partner your co-host on the show, but I mean, you guys you don't pull any punches. I mean, you guys tell it like it is, right?
Well, when we started the whole thing, and that's probably what I didn't go into enough in the first round, but we were like, dads have a different mentality. People have got on us for caring about the price too much because, I mean, $100 is different to everybody.
Sure.
But we also realize when you have kids, you can't be blowing a whole lot of money on whiskey every month. And
right.
A lot of people that either know or don't know go into a liquor store and they can get, and you see a whole bunch of stuff on the wall and you don't get it unless you can translate the label and know what's going on, know about contract distilling. And hey, maybe you're looking at this wall of whiskey, but 25 of them were all distilled in the same place. You just don't know because you can't read and see what Lawrenceburg, Indiana is, or Tullahoma, Tennessee is, or any other place. Green River's putting out good stuff now, but unless you know that, you can't be. You could get really scared. So we said, no matter what, we both have good day jobs. We said number one overall honesty, but it's also. We may not pull punches, but it's always doing it in a respectful way. So I might tell somebody that, hey, I think their juice is a little young and it's sweet and I could see it needing another year. But it's also, hey, but I am getting hints of something. I always try to tell a negative with a positive. So don't just crap on it, because this is stuff that people are putting their blood, sweat, and tears into. They're very proud of what they've done. I'm never going to sit with someone and say, hey, this is a drain pour. But I mean, we'll have people on all the time and they'll be like, hey, I did this whiskey. I'm so proud of it. It's finished in Cab Sav. And I'm like, yeah, we don't like wine finish whiskey. Like, it is very documented.
Yeah, right.
I kind of feel like it's a carryover from Scotch that we don't need in bourbon. And it's people were doing it because everybody did it. But it's number one overall, we never want to be somebody that is begging for samples or saying that we love everything just because we want free stuff. It's like, listen, it's well documented. If we don't get it, we'll go buy it. We'll find a way to get 2 ounces of it. We're not, first and foremost, we are a show of the people. We are a consumer-based show. And then with our interviews, we like telling stories. I like giving these distilleries and people in the industry a place to tell their story. But when it comes to the whiskey, we're never going to say we like something just to say we like it.
That's good. I mean, it's good to be honest, and your listeners appreciate that. There's no question. And I appreciate it because I listen to your show. And that's one thing I've always appreciated about you and Zeke. When I can understand what Zeke's saying, no, I'm just kidding.
You Kentuckians don't understand Northwest Georgia.
Sometimes you gotta listen really hard, but you guys do a great job together. There's no question about it. So let's talk about Matt. You got the bottle out there. You want to tell everybody what we got poured up in the second round?
I sure would. We have poured up for round number 2 from the king of the bootleggers himself. And MGP, we have the Remus Repeal Reserve, and this is the batch 5. So this is the 2021 medley. So this is a straight bourbon whiskey at 100 proof or 50% alcohol by volume. And this mix there's a list the mixture right on the front here. It is a blend of 5 different bourbons. So we have 9% of a 2005 bourbon at 21% rye in that mash bill, 5% of a 2006 bourbon with 36% rye, 19% of a 2006 bourbon at 21% rye, 13% of a 2008 bourbon at 21% rye, and 54% of a 2008 36% high rye bourbon.
Very nice, man. And so people know, I mean, this is a product from MGP. This is their own label, their own brand, the Remus brand, like the Rossville Union Rye that they put out. So this is their stuff. So you're talking about MGP bourbon that is between 13 and 16 years old in this blend. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah,
I think. So John, what do you get? Because you've got a bottle, you got it poured up. What do you pick it up on that?
So one thing that I would say is typically, because we already did a review on this one.
Okay.
Typically, when I see MGP that's over 12 years old, I get scared. Okay. And I think MGP can really get over oaked when it's over 12 years old. And also the thing that I think people have to realize, and this is where whiskey becomes so crazy, is that if people source from MGP, I'm sure you guys know this, but they have cement rickhouses. So the longer it ages in Indiana, actually the proof goes down more because it's not in a wooden rickhouse and the air is not flowing the same way to actually raise the proof up. But I always kind of wonder how long was it aged in Indiana versus how long was it then purchased by somebody and aged someplace else. Now this stuff is being put out by MGP, so that it's aged in Indiana the whole time.
Right.
I would say I love the blend. So I said that whole preference that I kind of worry about it being over oaked. I don't think this is over oaked at all, which is what is really impressive to me. I get a whole lot of fruit on the nose. I just think this is super fruity. And, there are other aspects of bourbon in there. There's a little bit of oak. There is that, Mark's favorite vanilla, but a lot of fruit there for me. And it's more of a darker fruit. Like I'm getting like blackberries and just deeper, darker fruits than a lighter fruit. It's not very light and airy, and there's a lot of substance to this. I would say I'm not doing it justice in the tasting note right now, but I would say there's a complexity there with all the blend that I really enjoy.
Yeah, definitely. Matt, what about you, man? What do you pick up over there?
The first thing I really picked up on the nose was graham cracker. Sometimes, and a lot of times, often with MGP, especially their higher rye, I'll pick up a good nose of graham cracker, or like a baked cracker, some sort of like not a full on baking spice, but maybe like subtle hints of nutmeg or allspice, but not a cinnamon, not anything too sweet like that. But then I get a good amount of oak with it. I can tell there's definitely some age, but I think that the rye coming through, because I get something a little bit herbal, almost like a little mint coming through. I think that really helps to cut a lot of that heavy oak on the nose for me.
Gotcha. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not picking much up on this one. I hate to say that. I'm just like, you talking about the fruit, John. I am picking up the fruit. But man, beyond that, and a little bit of vanilla. I do get the vanilla.
I just love how Mark's limping along. He's an injured player. He's still on the IR. And he's like, no, you know what? We're going to keep the format the same, even though I can't do crap.
That's exactly right. Because that's what we do. That's why Matt is here, because everybody wants to hear what Matt thinks anyway, man. Nobody cares. Everybody knows that Mark's going to say, oh yeah, whatever Matt said, that's what I get too. So, or whatever John gets. See, I can use you now, John, because you're good at this too. So I can just say same thing that John and Matt are picking up. That's me. Ditto.
Well, what we do on my show or our show, what we do on Dads Drinking Bourbon is that I take sports radio and have kind of moved it to whiskey. So I'm the play-by-play guy. Zeke is the analyst. Yeah. So I let him go first, but then instead of basically giving the same exact notes as he just gave, I'll just fill in blanks. So I'll just say anything that I get different from him. But just like this, most people want to hear what Matt has to say more. It just annoys me in interviews because I'll do all the legwork, all the research, set the whole thing up. I'll talk for the first 30 minutes, get the whole backstory, and then Zeke asks one question. And then the guest all of a sudden is like, that's an amazing question. I like you more.
My God, that sounds so familiar.
That kind of does sound like our playbook here.
I'm like, I just did all the hard part, and you just sat there drinking, and you asked one question, and then the guest likes you.
Man, I swear, John, if I could go back and go through all the episodes where we've had guests that, I've got this list of 15, 20 questions that I've worked on, and we'll run through and we'll start going through them. And then Matt just asked this great question, and the guests are just like, Matt, that is such a great question. I mean, it happens at least probably 50% of the time, John. I'm just like, what the hell? What's wrong with my questions?
You know what I think it is, if you have a friend that's a jerk and they're always a jerk and then they do something nice, everybody's like, oh my God, that person did such a nice thing. And it's like, so if one person's doing all the talking and then somebody else talks, I think it's a shock thing more than anything. Like,
yeah,
you know how to talk?
That could be it. Maybe it's because I drive the ship and I probably talk a little bit too much, Matt. So that's what it is.
You two are like the two most underappreciated hosts in podcasting, and like a conversation with two middle children over here.
I'm just telling you, when one person does all the work and the other guy just has to show up and drink, I mean.
Well, now we're not that. Matt does his share, man. So I'm not.
I don't know. I still got a pretty sweet gig. I'm not gonna lie.
No, Zeke, admittedly, we were at Kentucky Bourbon Festival over the weekend, and he was off doing something. The first show we had back, he goes, well, admittedly, John was the one off doing the media stuff. I mean, he's very open and honest about it, that he just has to show up and talk whiskey, and then I'm editing, I'm doing the social media. And somebody was like, hey, I have samples I want to send you. And he literally said, John's the guy who does all that. Go talk to him.
So, John, you and I are like the Jan Brady's of podcasting. We're the middle child, right? So Marsha gets, or Matt, and Zeke, they get all the attention, and you and I we just sit there and do our thing, man.
100%. It is like John, Stockholm syndrome, though.
When you started the show, I mean, did you have a mission in mind? Did you have this? I know you said you'd started the Suburban Dad, or what? Suburban Guy? Was that what it was called?
Suburban Dad.
Okay, so you'd started that, and then you were also doing the Dads Drinking Bourbon. But when you started that, was there something in your head that you said, I really want this to be about XYZ. I want it to be about this. This is my goal. This is the mission. This is what I really want it to be about.
That really started with the lives, not necessarily with the blog, because the blog was straight reviews. I mean, it was all, actually, I take that back. It's all the same thing. I mean, it was all just like I was saying before about educating dads, honesty, integrity. And that's kind of what we said first and foremost. No matter what happens with everything, we wanted to always be honest and never lie about. We see a lot of people that, hey, maybe they're just posting tasting notes that they get from the distillery themselves, or
right.
Maybe they're not really being honest. Like I see a lot of people, and if they'll post something that, some releases are better than others. Let's just be honest. Sometimes a blend will miss the mark. Sometimes it's hot, but at the same time, what I'll say with that is the cool thing about Zeke and I is our palates are completely opposite. So something that I think is really hot, he thinks is really sweet, and something that I think is really sweet, he thinks is really hot. And I think, that's the other thing to remember, is that there's nothing that you're going to say wrong about whiskey, because it's your palate and it's your perception. And so we wanted people to know that too, that, if you like something, you're 100% right. If you're wrong, if you don't like something, you're 100% wrong.
Right.
And that's the thing that people forget. I think people get so nervous and they're afraid to say what they get as tasting notes because they're like, I'm not an expert. I'm like, close your eyes, use your factory senses. What's the first thing you think of? If you think of, I did it as a joke the other day, but I did tasting notes for pumpkin spice coffee.
Oh yeah. I know how much you love pumpkin spice, man.
I just don't like it before fall. And yesterday was the first day of fall. I just hate when people are drinking pumpkin spice in August when it's still the summer.
Oh man.
And it's like, white pants after Labor Day. There shouldn't be any pumpkin anything before mid-September.
Oh, I guess I need to go change.
But I took a nose of that coffee that I'd promised everybody I would drink when it was officially fall. And I immediately thought of like the potpourri that my mom used to make on the stove. And it was before you had scented candles.
Right,
but
right.
it's like that stuff you actually had to put in the pot and cook it up.
Right.
And like that was my nose on that. But just like on bourbon and whiskey, if you close your eyes and you take a sniff and you take a taste and it takes you back to something, maybe it makes you think of, like the pancakes and syrup that your granny used to make.
Sure.
Or the French, whatever it is, you're not wrong. And like if you drink with ice in your glass or you drink it neat or you drink old fashions or you put some Coke in there, like whatever it is, just enjoy whiskey. And that's ultimately kind of what we're about, is just drink what you like, how you like it. And I think people get caught up in ratings. Like,
yeah, right.
Is it a numeric rating or should you buy it? And I tell people we rate begrudgingly. We want everybody to go try it. Go have an ounce of everything and figure out what your palate is and go for that. But it's more the notes. Listen to what we get on the notes. And if that appeals to you, then go get it. If it doesn't, then don't.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. And speaking of notes, let's jump back to this Remus repeal. What are you laughing at my segue there, John? I mean, come on, man. I thought that was
like enough talking, more whiskey.
That was a great question, Mark. Let's get back. So what do you guys get in terms of the palate and the finish on this one, Matt?
So I think, John, what you were talking about with the fruit, I didn't pick it up on the nose initially, but now as it's set out, I'm getting a little bit more, and I'm getting some fruit on the palate especially. At first, I get a nice, good little punch of some spice. I think that rye really comes through right at the start. There's nice peppercorn, but then I'm getting like sweet, luscious fruit, like strawberries. What I'm reminded of most is like a Twizzler, like red licorice comes through on the palate. Nice. And then there's some really nice oak. You can feel the age, taste the age coming through with it as well. And then a really great, nice, long, warm, typical MGP peppercorn, spicy, hot finish for me.
Yeah. John, what about you, man?
The crazy thing is, I think there's a lot of good rye spice on this as well. And it really makes your tongue tingle.
Yeah.
You have the wood and the oak is definitely there. It's a little drier than it was on the toasted barrel that we just had, but there's a fair amount of oak that's there as well. The fruit, obviously, I agree with you 100% on that. And, I think it's just a solid MGP blend. It's not too oaky because I think they did a really good job blending in different things. And the thing that, trying to remember what I did with my bottle, it's the percentage here, right? So the stuff that they're really using, like that older stuff, the 2005, 2006, that's 9% and 5%.
Right.
And they're really using that 2008. That's the most stuff they have at 54%. And that's a 36. That's their high rye.
Right.
I think that MGP's higher rye ends up coming across as sweet most times, which I find really interesting that you would think it would be a little spicier and you think it would be a little more prickly.
Yeah.
But I think their 36% rye mash comes across sweet as hell to me.
Yeah, I definitely get the sweetness off of this because, again, not able to pick out a lot of flavors, but the spice obviously hits the tongue and then lingers, like you said, Matt, John. I mean, it just the tingling tongue, I love it. And yeah, Matt, it kind of comes across on the finish, kind of peppercorny to me. But again, I'm having a hard time distinguishing flavors, but that sweetness I can just, I can feel the sweetness on my tongue. I can't really put a flavor to it like a strawberry or a blackberry or some other type of fruit. But yeah, man, I can just pick up that sweetness. And I was a big fan of the Repeal, the batch number 4 that came out last year, Matt. We've had that before, and I absolutely love that. So I'm really excited with this one. I can't wait till I can actually
do a little
side by side
here. Yeah,
get my flavors back a little bit better than what they are now, and do these side by side, man. So, but yeah, and Matt, I got to give thanks to you because you picked this up when, we didn't talk about that either. And I'm sorry, I should have said something, man. Matt did Ironman Wisconsin a couple of weekends ago. We didn't get to record last week because I was out. But the week before, Matt actually competed in Wisconsin, the Ironman full distance there. And Matt, you kind of kicked ass, didn't you?
I had a better day than I was expecting.
What'd you finish in? Like 10 hours, 12 minutes, and a few seconds? Yeah. So you finished, what'd you finish overall? 25th overall?
26.
Yeah. 26 overall out of how many thousand? 2,000? 18,000? 1,800? 2,100?
1,700.
Yeah. Just
you're just being so nonchalant about it.
I know,
like,
dude.
There were 1,800 and I was...
Yeah. 1,800 and I was number 26. And he had just separated his collarbone a month before in a bike wreck. So no shit. I mean, the guy was like, could barely swim for 2 weeks, and still went up and did the damn race and ended up 26th overall. So kudos to Matt on a great race. But kudos to Matt as well, because while he was up there for the race, he texted me. He's like, "Hey man, I found the Remus Repeal Reserve batch 5. Do you guys want some bottles?"
Yeah, so I ended up muling a ton of bourbon back home. But happy to do it.
Yeah, so not only does he kick ass in the Ironman race, he also mules back a bunch of bourbon for us, man.
I mean, I would expect nothing less. If he didn't do that, you have problems.
Yeah, no doubt, man.
Time to pull your weight, Matt.
Yeah, man. Yeah, no doubt about it. So I definitely appreciate that, Matt. So final thoughts, guys. We'll wrap up this session, but final thoughts on this batch 5 of the Remus Repeal Reserve. What do you think?
I'm a fan.
Yeah, me too. And this one was what, 97, Matt? Right at $100. Is that right?
Yeah, $100, a little over 100 out the door.
Yeah.
I think considering what they put this at, to elaborate a little bit, considering what they put this at, price-wise and what's in the bottle, if any NDP had this and released the same thing, there's no way this is under 200. So I just have to say hats off to MGP for how they released it, where they put it at. And I am a huge fan of it, not only for the price, but because of the taste. And I just, I think there's some good stuff. That rye that they put out as well is really good at MGP, and it's about time MGP realized everybody else was making money off of them and they could make some money themselves.
Yeah, for real. That's the biggest takeaway of all of this.
Yeah,
we're all happy to do it for you, MGP. Thank you. You deserve this.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And John, that's a great point. The fact that if this was released by an NDP and they've got a blend of a 13-year-old all the way up to 16-year-old, this would easily be $225, $275 a bottle, so the fact that they priced this just under $100 is pretty amazing for me. All right, guys. With that said, I'm going to wrap up this session. We'll get a word from our sponsor. We'll be back with more with John Edwards from Dads Drinking Bourbon in just a minute. So everybody sit tight and we will be right back.
The Stave Restaurant is a bourbon lover's paradise right here in the heart of bourbon country. Located at 5711 McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky, between Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve, Chef Kyle Klatka prepares amazing food each day that features an elevated Kentucky-inspired cuisine. With a full-service bar, great bourbon flights, and signature cocktails, the Stave is the perfect place to catch up with friends after a fun-filled day of touring the local distilleries. Be sure to check them out online at thestavekentucky.com or at Instagram and Facebook at The Stave Kentucky.
Huling Station from Old Dominick is all about balancing tradition and innovation. The historic Huling Station warehouse in Memphis, Tennessee housed the Old Dominick brand more than a century ago, and today is celebrated with 3 distinct whiskey mash bills, including Huling Station Straight Bourbon, Huling Station Straight Wheat, and Huling Station Blend, which is a blend of the straight bourbon and straight wheat, all of which are exclusively aged in West Tennessee white oak barrels. Visit OldDominic.com/shop to find more information and to purchase online. Be sure to follow @OldDominic on Instagram and Facebook for the latest news and weekly cocktail recipes. All right, everybody, welcome back for the third and final round, period, session, whatever you want to call it, of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, live from the Bourbon Life Studios in my basement with my good friend, co-host, buddy, pal, Matt. What's going on, Matt?
Hey, Mark, not much, man. Just excited to be back and looking forward to another exciting round number 3, because we have got bringing it home with us from Dads Drinking Bourbon, the Dads Drinking Bourbon podcast, I should say, John Edwards. John, welcome back for round session period shift number 3.
All right, so Mark said that he had questions for me, and this is the part where I'm hijacking your podcast. So, Mark, I want to know.
Oh, all right.
Who at Jack Daniels hurt you?
Oh, man. John, you went to Kentucky, man, so you understand that Kentucky, Tennessee hatred, but here's the thing, man. I was born and raised in Eastern Kentucky, and I'll tell you, man, growing up, Tennessee was you were just taught to hate Tennessee. You were taught to hate Louisville. Those are the two schools that I hate. As a state, I love Tennessee. My wife and I got married there almost 21 years ago. I love going down to the mountains in Gatlinburg, and I love going to Nashville and hanging out. But as far as Tennessee whiskey from Jack Daniels and Tennessee football and basketball, man, those are three things that I will never partake in.
So I still remember when Kentucky and Tennessee used to have a good rivalry.
Yeah.
I think that it's now kind of more Kentucky, Florida than Kentucky, Tennessee.
Yeah.
But I think I remember, being in college and after college, and you go someplace and you go, hey, can I have a bourbon? And then they come bring you Jack Daniels, and there's a little state pride there. I mean,
yes.
Let's be honest. Jack Daniels is in Tennessee whiskey is a subset of bourbon. Anybody who doesn't think so, you're wrong.
Right.
Okay, we're past it. But what I will implore you to do is Tennessee has a lot of great stuff going for it. I will admit, I'm not a fan of the 80 proof Jack, but don't turn your back on Jack Daniels barrel proof.
Yeah.
Chattanooga whiskey is doing amazing stuff down here.
I have no problem with Chattanooga, Davidson Reserve. I love those guys, man. Uncle Nearest, seriously, I'll drink all that stuff. But
Old Dominic is doing awesome stuff.
Love Old Dominic. Alex Castle is killing it down there, man. So I
love the blend. Have you had the blend of straight whiskeys? That one is my favorite.
Yeah. Alex is doing a great job down there. So yes. So don't take it that my hatred of Jack Daniels is across the board for all Tennessee whiskeys and Tennessee bourbons and everything else. No, we're fans, man. We love Davidson Reserve. We've had them on the show. Jeff and Penny, or Jeff. Wait, is that right? Penny?
Jeff and Jenny.
Yeah. So we've had Jeff and Jenny. We had them on the show. We had Fawn Weaver on the show. So really enjoy what they're doing at Uncle Nearest. And man, We've had Alex Castle on the show. So I have nothing against it, but Jack Daniels, it's just not going to happen. And it's become this running joke, obviously now, John. So anytime anybody posts anything about Jack Daniels, they tag me now on Instagram and they're like, hey, the Bourbon Life, check this out.
I will just say though, because, as somebody who was in your boat and somebody who's a Kentucky grad, I still think if you think of what's on the shelf out there and you think of all the stuff that you could possibly get, Jack Daniels Barrel Proof is a 5-year whiskey that's at 130 or higher proof, that if you told me it tasted 130 proof, I'd tell you you're crazy.
Yeah.
Like that thing goes down much easier, and it's $60 to $70 on the shelf. You're going to be able to find it on the shelf. It hasn't, it doesn't have as wide of a distribution as everything, but it's non-allocated. You go to try to find George C. Stagg on the shelf, which is the other whiskey that's probably a high proofer like that, or Elijah Craig barrel proof. you ain't finding those,
Right.
but you're finding Jack Daniel's barrel proof.
Right.
So for the value, what it is, the fact that it has kind of caught on, but hasn't officially caught on yet, I got to love it because it's one of the only things that I'm like, man, this has not been ruined yet.
Sure.
And I know that's a perfect segue for you as a host to ask me a question about the state of the market, which is something you wanted to do.
Yeah, but before I do that, I'm gonna dial it back and talk about what we're drinking in this round first, John, because we're getting like 5 minutes, 6 minutes into this session, and we've not talked about what we're drinking yet.
Nobody cares what we're drinking anymore. They just want to hear us
We
chat.
have to, John. We gotta stick to the schedule, man. Okay, come on, don't be. No, I'm just kidding. So Matt, tell everybody what we got poured up, so I can get back to this question on John.
All right, I will rush through this one, but I don't know if it's going to be too quick because this is
There's a lot.
Yeah, this for real. This is a rye whiskey that's far more traveled and sophisticated than I am. So this is the Barrell Seagrass that we've got poured up, and it is a blend of American and Canadian rye whiskeys. So distilled in Kentucky, Indiana, Tennessee, and Canada. And then this is finished in Martinique rum, Madeira, and apricot brandy barrels.
Lots of stuff going on there, man.
Yeah, no kidding. But if there's anybody I'm going to trust with this one, it would be Trip Stimson over at Barrell Craft Spirits.
Yeah, man. I'm telling you what, those guys, goodness gracious, man. He and Joe Beatrice, we've had them on the show talking Barrell Spirits, and we've also had them on the show talking when they came out with the brand new Stellum line of stuff. Man, Trip's he just kills it. I mean, he really does. So what do you guys pick up in terms of the nose on this one?
There's a whole lot of stuff on this nose, but I will tell you there's one thing that sticks out more than anything. I'll let Matt give his laundry list of everything that's there. But cherry pie.
Okay. Gotcha.
There is a whole lot of cherry pie on the nose for me, and I love
John,
it.
can you sing a little warrant for us? A little cherry pie? Because I know you'd love to sing. You got a guitar there. You can just,
I got 1, 2, 3. I got 5 guitars in this room right now.
All right.
And you don't want me to pick one up.
That's a challenge, man. Come on, John. We can do this. No. All right, Matt. So what do you get? John's got some cherry pie coming through there heavily. So what do you pick up on it?
He got a cool drink of water.
I get some caramel on the nose, and
Caramel.
then it's pretty little herbal. I get the mint coming through, and then apricots.
So it's like, yep, there you go. So you get what you want.
Yeah, maybe it is just seeing that it's apricot brandy barrel finish, but apricot comes through big time for me.
I guys, unfortunately, I'm just not picking up. I'm not picking up a lot on this, man.
Right? He's like, it's too spicy.
It's like,
I just get spice.
It's like, I know there's a whiskey in my glass. I can tell that. I get some sweetness off of it, but I can't tell you what that translates over. It's not necessarily apricots for me. So, John, let's get back and segue back to what we're talking about, the state of the bourbon industry. But I will say before that, I have had the Jack Daniel's single barrel proof, the gold label, right? And
yes,
yeah, and I did enjoy it. I will have to give props. I'm not gonna lie. But I will say I've had it one time, and it was down in Nashville. I was at I can't remember what the name of that liquor store is down there. But the guys were really cool. Took me in the back room and started pouring a bunch of stuff out of little lockers and stuff. So
you were at Barrels and Brews.
Barrels and Brews. That's right. Yes. Thank you, John. There you go. And one of the guys because I was talking about Jack Daniels. I'm like, no, I'm not a Jack Daniels guy. He goes, well, you got to try this. He poured me some up, and I was like, yep, all right, that's legit. I agree. I did enjoy it, John. So I do have to at least admit that. So with that being said, let's go back and talk about the state of the bourbon market. Where do you see things headed, and where are we now? And what's your take on that?
Well, I mean, we're an hour into this. I know it's probably about 50 minutes with breaks, but we don't have enough time to talk about this. But I think that there is a whole lot of NDPs popping up.
Yeah.
And I'll be interested to see if these are NDPs that are popping up for the moment or if it's something that's going to be long term. I definitely see brands like Nashville Barrel Company, Penelope that are long term and have deals in place. I mean, even our fellow podcasters, Pursuit,
Right.
Bourbon Pursuit, and Pursuit United, they have long term deals that are set up.
Right.
And that's going to be the differentiators for NDPs. I think distilleries are realizing, if you think about what Diageo's done, what MGP is doing now, they're realizing they're giving up a lot of barrels, and that's money that they could be making on their own.
Right.
So I think you're going to see a rise of contract distillers such as Tennessee Distilling Company, which a lot of people don't realize TDC is doing a whole hell of a lot in whiskey, and they're starting to make a name for themselves. Green River, you're going to see more and more of as Bradshaw uses them.
Right.
Blue Note uses them. I know the Walker's K that just came out uses them. There's a lot of people. I think it's a great whiskey at a great price. I think it was a great thing for OZ Tyler to rebrand
definitely
to Green River. But I think that you're going to be looking at who's got long-term deals as far as NDP, because a whole bunch have popped up. I think there is a whole lot to be said about where the pricing is going for limited offerings. And I think there's going to be people returning to tried and true. The people that can afford the limited offerings are great, but I can't afford a George Dickel at $300.
No, yeah.
I'm out
at
that point.
Right.
But I think you're going to see a lot more people realizing like Wild Turkey 101 is great. Old Tub is great. You have Evan Williams Bottled and Bond. There's a whole lot of stuff that are just those staples that are awesome and people need to remember. I also think we're saturated with a lot of SKUs and people are always looking for the new shiny ball. And I'm happy that there's stuff coming out like Seagrass, like we just had. It's unique. I don't think more people need to be doing honey finishes or toasted barrels.
Right.
It's what's something new that we haven't had before. Don't just introduce a SKU to introduce a SKU. That's the thing that I'm confused with, is that I feel like everybody's trying to hop on every trend and you don't have to hop on every trend.
Right.
And I'll get off my soapbox, but there's just a lot that I think something gets trendy and then, people are doing it with the toasted, the honey. Apple brandy is a very popular finish right now. And I think once you see that 3, 4, or 5 distilleries have done it and done it well, go find something new. Don't just I mean, what you don't know is have everybody been working on it and just it happens to hit at the same time? Or is somebody monitoring the TTB and going, oh, they're releasing that, I got to get on it?
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. That's a good point, man. I mean, and speaking of, keeping things fresh and doing things that other people aren't doing, you guys have been around now for what, 5 years, 4 or 5 years, 6 years?
Yeah.
So how is it? I mean, week after week, man, you're putting out content, you're putting out shows, you're doing that stuff. How do you keep it fresh? How do you keep it exciting for yourselves? I mean, how do you keep your listeners and everybody engaged, John?
It's a great question.
Dang!
I don't know.
All right, Matt, take that, man.
Matt doesn't like me. He hasn't asked a question.
Okay. Mark doesn't even give me a chance to cut in here.
Sorry, dude.
It's like you two are out on the ballroom floor dancing, and I don't even get the chance to tap a shoulder.
You got 2 big bourbon bears out here dancing together, man. Just leave us alone.
Matt, do you have any questions?
I'll let you field that one first, because I think that actually is a really great question.
Thank you,
long
Matt.
as you all have been around.
Thanks.
How do you keep it fresh? How do you keep not just your listeners engaged, but keep yourself engaged in it? I know that some days Mark and I are sitting around and we're kind of thinking like, oh God, how much more can we beat this dead horse on some of these topic conversations? How do you do it? How do you stay fresh and stay engaged yourself in keeping everyone else engaged and and getting people on your shows that really provide fresh insight and take you and your show to places that it hasn't been.
So COVID was really tough.
Yeah.
I'd say, as far as, the monotony of, all right, well, how often are we just going to have Zeke and I together to review whiskey? And I had a pretty steadfast rule for a while until COVID that I said no virtual interviews, just because I think there is a difference when you're in the room with someone.
Right.
And just somebody on Reddit once said about Dads Drinking Bourbon, it's the one show where I feel like the hosts are having as much fun as the guest. Or edit that out, Mark. Somebody once said on Reddit that Dads Drinking Bourbon is the show where they feel like the guests are having as much fun as the hosts. And I loved that. That was a badge of honor for me, because I feel like we can have industry people on and get them to open up and be real and have fun, because they also know I'm not going to put something out there that's going to screw them over. That's not what we're about. Right. We're going to present everybody well, and we're going to tell their story, but we also want to have fun. And I also don't want the same old marketing material that everybody's going to get. We're going to steer you away and loosen you up. And the magic of that was recording in person and having an hour, sometimes 2 hours, a half an hour beforehand when they show up to wherever you're recording together. And it's like, hey, let's have a pour. Let's get to know each other before we actually hit the record button. And you don't have that as much with the virtual recording. Thankfully, Matt, I think the difference is here is that Mark and I have a relationship and we're friends. And I would like to be your friend.
I don't know that I go that far yet, John, but we're working on it.
Well, I'll go that far.
But Matt, I would like to be your friend, so you can hit me up. But
yeah,
I think that's the thing is making sure that it doesn't. There's so many brand ambassadors that go on so many shows, and they sit there and they go, all right, this is the mash bill, this is the 8. It's very cut and dry to the topic that they're talking about. I think the difference is getting them to be a real person and talk about stuff they do outside of whiskey, and getting to know that person, what makes them tick, even if you're talking about a brand. And then I think it's tough making it fresh. I mean, there's only so much you could do when you're given notes on something. It's nose, taste, finish,
right.
Mm-hmm.
Those reviews are based off of what comes out. So I think there's always going to kind of be a monotony to that. I think what separates Zeke and I from some of the other podcasts, and I think everybody would kind of agree with this, is the banter. I don't think any two hosts give each other as much shit as Zeke and I give each other on a daily basis. And I think it truly is modeled after what are those conversations you're going to have with your friends if you think that nobody is recording.
Right.
And what are you really honestly saying about the whiskey in a respectful way? And that's kind of where I think we're cognizant of the fact that we're being recorded, but it's the banter, I think, that separates us, keeps it fresh, and it's getting, I have a thing. Zeke is newly single and, still is a dad drinking bourbon, but I have this big desire that I want to do a podcast show where I have 3 women that are blacked out on the screen, and that he gets to ask them questions, and then we'll decide, so it's a big podcast dating show. My favorite thing ever is that I have now got Joanne Street to weigh in on this. I have got Jane Bowie and Harry Potter to weigh in on this.
Nice.
So there's a lot of big famous whiskey people that I might bring this up to, and kind of sets it apart, right? Like you're hearing these people talk about how are we going to get together this great dating podcast for Zeke? It's not what you would get on every show, and
Yeah.
I really think if there are other shows that are more 60 minutes, we're more the daily show
Right.
of whiskey.
Yep. That's great, man. And I mean, we enjoy it. I enjoy listening to you guys, man. I always have. It's been several years I've listened to you guys. So definitely enjoy that. So John, let me ask you this. If you'll
wait, Matt, do you have a question before?
That's right. Yeah, Matt, go ahead, man. I'm sorry. I digress.
Oh no, I honestly I don't have any questions right yet, but it's refreshing to hear that for you all it's just casual, it's conversational. I like that. I think Mark and we try to model ourselves after that, but we can be a little bit matter of fact and business oriented, but it's always great when you can take a guest and almost forget that there's bourbon or whiskey involved and just get deep and chat with them and start talking about them and their lives. And suddenly you have to be like, oh yeah, wait, you're actually a master distiller. You have an important role within this brand. Let's get back to that. I like when you can just be real, talk to people, hear their story, not just the story of the brand they represent.
Well, and I think there's a rinse and repeat aspect of it too. I know a lot of PR people get frustrated with us because they say, do you have a list of questions that you're going to ask? And I say, no.
Yeah, right.
But I'm like, it's whiskey. We're going to ask about, like, hey, how did you get started in whiskey?
Right. Yeah, right.
Tell me about this whiskey. But then wherever the conversation goes from there, it's like, kind of what we're going to talk about without us having to give you a list of questions. But we never give a list of questions. I always kind of say it's sports radio with the Howard Stern interview mixed in. And that's the Howard Stern on Sirius now when he has a guest and he'll do that long form interview. There's no breaks.
Yeah.
There's just, let's have a conversation, see where it goes. And that's kind of what, somebody might say something and all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait, I want to hone in on that. Mm-hmm. They said something about a specific type of aging they're doing or, a barrel. You might get hooked in on cooperages or, I remember we had Dan Gardner from Four Roses on and he was talking about tight staves versus open staves and all this stuff that Jim Rutledge taught him. And then it was like, all right, well, now we're talking about wood. And we had this long conversation about staves that I never thought we would have. And then I would say like each show builds off of each other. So as we're going along this journey and we hear something and we hear knowledge, like Dan Gardner was talking about the staves, and then we had Greg Snyder on, who actually used to run the Brown-Forman Cooperage.
Right.
And we're like, well, Dan Gardner told us this stuff, and then Greg's like, yeah, I mean, that's the basic, but let me take it another step further. Yeah. And then you're just dorking out,
No, that's really cool, man. And that's what our listeners, and that's what your listeners, I mean, people want to hear that stuff. People enjoy that. People enjoy getting that inside detailed information that they're not going to get other places. So guys, let's talk real quick about the Seagrass. What in terms of the notes, in terms of the palate and the finish. Palate. Yeah, man, I'm sorry. I'm starting to wind down here, Matt. I apologize.
Oh, no problem. I'll kick it off.
Thank you.
I get a big palate. First, there's some really great spice right up front. You can tell you're drinking a rye, but I get like orange creamsicle.
Interesting.
100%.
Nice.
100%.
Nice, John. So orange dreamsicle. You're going with that.
And even when I go back to the nose, it's cherry pie mixed with orange dreamsicle. Like now that you said that,
very nice.
That's crazy. I just think of Dumb and Dumber, where he goes, kick his ass, Seabass. I'm like, kick his ass, Seagrass. But there's a whole lot of rye spice on this as well. Like just mouth full of rye spice.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. A nice big bouquet finish of that rye spice comes afterward, but that creamsicle, that sweetness is definitely there.
Man, you guys are killing me now because I'm trying so hard to pick that out, and it's like, nope, just got spiciness. No. That's about it. There's some sweet and there's some spice. So Damn it, John. Who would you say, if you can say, favorite?
Well, before you get to that, sorry.
Go ahead.
Matt, what I would even add to that too is that bouquet, it's funny because it's not in the front. Like where typically rye would get my lips and really give my lips a tingle. This hits halfway through and it's kind of really mid to back palate where that bouquet starts. And that's just crazy to me because even as I sip this now, my lips aren't tingling. And normally a heavy rye or a rye in general would make my lips tingle pretty good. But this is all like the roof of my mouth that has pop rocks in it, but it's not the front.
Nice. Very nice. John, who's been your favorite guest, man? Can you share that, or will you say who one of your favorite guests may have been on your show?
The last person we had on. I mean, it's hard to.
Sure, I get it.
Say there's so many of them that we've enjoyed for so many different reasons.
Yeah.
And I couldn't really pick a favorite. I mean, we just had an amazing show with Jane and Denny from Michter
right.
But I even mentioned Dan Gardner. We had Sean Josephs from Pinhook, the boys from Penelope.
Right.
I mean, so many people we've had, and I hate naming names because there have been so many good ones, especially over years and years and years.
Yeah.
Alex Castle was an awesome guy. I mean, but then there's so many people I've had multiple times and like going to Grains and Grits and cutting up with the Tennessee folk and just kind of getting people. I mean, I remember we started off the one with Alex Castle because Megan Bridges, who is a member of the marketing team at Old Dominic, I said she sounded like the delicious dish on SNL, the one with Pete Schweddy.
Yeah.
We started off the podcast like it was NPR, like
welcome
the SNL skit.
Welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast.
It was, hi, welcome to the delicious dish. What did you bring to it? It was, and we just had an awesome time and cut it up. And then, Alex and Megan were talking about their love for Friends. It's, you never know what's going to happen. I remember we had Sean Josephs on in the middle of the NBA finals and we had it on the TV and just got into a whole conversation about basketball.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I love is just each interview is spontaneous in its own way. And you just find those spots to relate to people and build. I mean, I think the number one thing of all of this is we're honest and I think people can respect that, but we're also about building lasting relationships. And I generally love everybody in whiskey, from the people in the industry to the drinkers to the people that are quote unquote influencers on Instagram to just people that run bourbon groups. Everything about bourbon is better together. And I just love the relationships. I mean, I think the number one thing is we've always been about honesty and integrity. But if I were to say the second thing we're about, it's about community.
Yeah.
And it's about remembering that this is a team sport. Bourbon, if you're doing it by yourself, it's not really that fun. And you should probably be calling somebody, but it is a team sport. And I can't remember exactly the tasting notes of everything I drank, but I can remember who I drank it with.
Yeah. Well, that's funny.
That's very well said.
Yeah, because that was the question the next question, John, and you kind of answered it. I was going to say, what do you love the most about the bourbon community? So, I mean, you kind of answered that, really, I think.
I'm trying to be cognizant because I know we're deep in, and you got to edit this tonight.
No,
so
that's all right, man. We're all good. Trust me, it's all good. So I appreciate that answer. So, John, what the future? What does it look like for you yourself, John Edwards, and Dad's Drinking Bourbon?
We're just gonna keep it on. Life's a garden. Dig it.
We're gonna dig it.
I mean, there's nothing that I could tell you that that when I worked in radio, I will say that it stopped being fun.
Yeah.
And when it's your job, there is something to that it doesn't become, then you're worried about, how am I going to support myself off this thing? How am I going to, there's pressure that's there. I also think there's, pressure in where you're getting sponsorship from. And that's no disrespect to you all. I just think that there are certain places and certain ways that you do this that you then become behooven to people.
Right.
And I never want to feel like I owe anybody anything. And I never want to feel like our interviews are going to be influenced by anything, or our reviews are going to be influenced by anything. So, like when I was at ESPN, I got people asking me who's UK recruiting all the time. I'd be at a concert, and Matt, how old are you? I hate to ask this, but
I am 34.
Okay, so you might remember. Do you remember the Dame in Lexington?
I'm not actually an original Kentuckian here, so.
Oh, never mind then, transplant.
Yeah.
Damn it, Matt.
But there was a concert venue that was in the building that had Buster's and Mia, and then they tore it down, and then it became a big paddock in downtown Lexington for
a long time. It's where the Marriott is now, Matt, but it was just a big open field. But before that, it was
I remember the open field.
Yeah, before that, it was a bunch of cool bars and stuff, and yeah.
So I used to work at the Dame.
Oh, okay.
And I would still, do some doorman bouncing stuff on weekends, even when I was still in radio, and I worked there in college as well. And, I'd be there and somebody would come up to me like, who's Kentucky recruiting? I'm like, I'm either watching a concert or I'm working here. Like, I don't want to talk about who Kentucky's recruiting. And I don't want to talk about what Tubby Smith was doing at the time, or what Rich Brooks was doing at the time.
Right.
Like, I want to enjoy this drink and get away from work.
Right.
And bourbon, it's the same, it can be a hobby right now and still be fun. I worry that we're just very, very cognizant of the podcast is fun and it's network building. And if the thing that comes after the podcast is the job in the industry,
right,
then so be it.
Gotcha.
But the podcast, and I think that's the thing that keeps it fresh for us, right? Is that if we're not having fun, we're not doing it.
Right.
Yeah, it's like the podcast doesn't owe you anything. You can just do whatever you want with it.
We make enough with our ads that we keep the lights on, and I pay for hosting and I pay for all that other stuff. And, anything above that, we really are not in it for money.
Yeah.
And we're totally Kevin Costner in the love of the game.
No, that's awesome, man. I mean, that's great. And that's obviously keeps it real for you guys and keeps it fresh and keeps it exciting. So kudos to you guys for sticking to that.
I mean, it's just, the one thing that I would say keeps it fresh is when the Bourbon Life all of a sudden just shoots up in popularity, like you all have deserved. And there's a lot of hard work there, but it keeps us on our toes that I'm like, oh shit, now I got to catch up with Mark and Matt. They're kicking our ass now.
No way, man. Yeah, not even close, dude. Not even close, John. So
I keep telling Mark, y'all are there. You are doing such a good job. And I love what you guys are doing. Mark has that, he's got that Kiss FM voice where, he's just smooth and sultry.
Well, thanks, John. I really appreciate that. I'll give you a call later this evening. We can talk some more off.
He's got that country, but not too much. It's the right amount that's authentic to be talking about bourbon.
Yeah, man, I owe you a karaoke too, man. I swear I'm gonna do a video of me singing some family traditions, some Hank Williams Jr. or something, man. So I owe you that much. So one of these days you're gonna get that. Don't be surprised.
I want you singing something like Jason Aldean where he's talking about Jack Daniels.
Yeah. There you go. So John, where can everybody find you guys, man? Information, where you guys, your stuff, find you on social media, podcasts, everything.
You can find us on Facebook at Dads Drinking Bourbon, Twitter at Bourbon Dads, Instagram at Dads Drinking Bourbon. Find us wherever you download your podcasts. Chances are, I hope you already have. But that's pretty much it. I mean, that's all the places that you can find us. And find the Bourbon Life too, because if you aren't following these guys on social media, you need to be following Mark and Matt on social media. I think Mark is behind posting a little more than Matt. I could get a little more of his flavor in there on social media, but I think they have some groups too on Facebook that you need to be following. Not to steal all your thunder, but I want the people to not only be listening to you, but I want them to be following you too.
Yeah, thanks, man. We appreciate that.
We think the same for you all as
no
well.
doubt.
This is hopefully been a podcast where you've been able to showcase yourself and what you all are doing, because you're doing such a great job. So we encourage all of our listeners, if you're not tuned in to Dads Drinking Bourbon on all the socials, and if you're not a subscriber of their podcast, please do so.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it's not a contest between podcasts here. We're all in the same boat.
Yeah.
The rising tide raises all ships. It's just great to get to connect with all these people that are doing these podcasts and in different forms of the media, and get to just talk to everybody, because like we were saying earlier, everyone's got a story regardless of where it lands them within or without of the bourbon industry.
Yep.
End quote. But it's just great to talk to real people.
I agree. And
you can tell, sorry, that was bad. Mark, I stepped on your toes.
No, dude. I was just going to say, just from a personal note, I mean, John and I are friends. We talk on the phone, we text, and I appreciate that. John's one of the most genuine guys in this industry, in this community, the bourbon community that's out there. So I appreciate you, John, when you reach out and we talk and we work through things and we talk through whatever's going on. And you're always just genuine and down to earth, and you just say it like it is. And I appreciate that very much. So I think our listeners definitely would benefit from, if they don't already follow you guys and listen to your stuff, they definitely need to, because you are definitely one of the good guys, man. And I really appreciate all that you do for the community and also for me personally. So thanks.
Well, I appreciate you just as much, and I will repay the favor. Y'all will come on Dads Drinking Bourbon.
Yeah.
And
we'll come to Nashville. We'll see you. We'll see you in person.
I promise you a hang. In Nashville.
All right, man. I'm going to hold you to that, John. So, all right, man. We should probably wrap it up here. We've had a great time, John. Thank you so much. But before we wrap it up, anything you want to add before we close it out?
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Matt, how about you, man? Anything you want to add before we wrap it up?
Hey, John, thank you for taking the time to figure out technology and be on the show with us. We really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you, and to all of our listeners out there, thank you all. We appreciate the support, and happy autumn, everybody.
Yeah, definitely, man. No question about that. And with that said, I want to just thank all of our sponsors for all they do for us. We really appreciate that. And with that said, though, I'm going to wrap it up, send us home with our tagline, which is, may your glasses always be full, and may you keep on living the bourbon life.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. Our mission at the Bourbon Life is simple: to share our passion for all things bourbon with you every week. And we'd really love to hear your thoughts on how we're doing. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life. You can also contact us by email at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And you can always find us on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a moment, we'd love it if you would rate us and give us a review. So until next week, we hope your glass is always full and that you keep on living the bourbon life.
Whether it's rye, sour mash Tennessee whiskey, or bourbon, Davidson Reserve has something delicious to offer any whiskey lover's palate. Pick up a bottle of one of our award-winning Davidson Reserve whiskeys from your local retailer today. Visit www.davidsonreserve.com for more information. And cheers to drinking local. Founded by J.W. McCulloch in 1885, Green River was known as the Whiskey Without Regrets. DSP KY10 was known for making some of the best whiskey in Kentucky, but fire, prohibition, multiple owners, and a gradual decline over many years eventually led to the demise of the brand. But last year, Green River celebrated the revival of Green River Distilling Company at its original home in Owensboro, Kentucky, and the team at Green River is proud to bring the same commitment to the best ingredients, craftsmanship, and tradition today, led by 8th generation distiller and Kentuckian Jacob Call. We encourage you to come and experience a special part of bourbon heritage in Owensboro. Find out more at www.greenriverdistilling.com.